What's going on, guys? It's Yahavy, David St. Clair Speaks. You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show. You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the St. Clair Speaks Show Podcast. I'm your host, Yahavy St. Clair. Guys, we are sitting with another incredible guest. I'm sitting down with Bobby Clark. Now, for those of you that don't know, Bobby Clark is a financial expert, a financial guru. This man is literally changing lives through financial literacy. Why is this important now? Did you not see what happened to the entire world within the last year? This is the perfect time for you to take out your notepad, get your notes ready, get your pen ready, pause this interview if you need to, rewind, fast forward. We're going to be diving into all things financial literacy, credit, cash, income, etc. Super excited for this interview. I personally feel like I've known Bobby for years. We've talked countless different times. We've met in networking groups, but the synergy and energy that we've had, it was literally one of the things that I wanted to do was get Bobby on this show immediately because this man is just a walking library of information, and it's an honor and privilege to sit down with him today. Bobby, I want to welcome you onto the St. Clair Speaks Show Podcast. Please give our audience and listeners maybe a 2 to 3 minute introduction on yourself, your brand, and your business, and what brings you onto the St. Clair Speaks Show Podcast.
Hey, Yahavy, I'm so excited to be here with you, man. All the energy and the love that you always bring forth when you interact with people, man, it's just fantastic. And it's just so invigorating. And hopefully I can keep up with the pace, man. But it's great to be here once again. Thanks so much for having me. And we're just going to have a talk here and just talk about money and finance and how we behave around that. So, you know, for me, I'm a financial coach. I'm owner of Clark on Money Financial Coaching Services, and I help individuals and small business owners replace the stress and the worry of managing their money with more happiness in their lives and provide guidance along the way. And how I do this is, I find out what clients want. And then we find out what's getting in the way of them getting what they want. And once we find that out, then we can build a plan where we can remove those blocks that's in their way, and they can proceed to their goals. So I've been doing this about almost about 10 years now. I started out as a part-time coach, and I retired in 2018 from the chemical industry. And with that extra time on my hand, I decided to just go full-time coaching. So I've always had a love for coaching. I started back with my parents. My dad was a small business owner, and my mom was a second grade teacher. And at the end of each day, he would bring home the business receipts, and we would sit around the kitchen table and just count nickels, dime, quarters, pennies. And it just got started from that. And my mom there encouraging me to learn as much as I could. And it just was a combination of that created a passion for finance, a passion for learning, a passion for teaching and coaching others. And I just have never lost that passion.
And you've also passed it down to generations as well. You gave me a really good referral with your nephew, Willie. And when we met, I'm glad I'm talking about this now, he was just telling me, of course, this Uncle Bobby, he's so successful. And you also mentioned your daughter's success as well. So I see where that generational wealth comes from. So give us a little bit more backstory on the generational wealth and why is it important, especially in our community, to have these conversations, right? They were planting seeds within you, as you mentioned, right? Coming home with those business receipts. That's planting seeds. Right. Your parents, they knew what they were doing, right? So let's talk on that.
Well, the thing about generational wealth or generational education, generational values, anything that's generational, we learn from our parents at a very young age, or someone that's in our environment that has an influence, good or whether it's bad. Hopefully it is good. But whatever we are in our environment as a young person tends to stay with us, even though we may not even be aware of it, but it's there. And as we grow older, we tend to reach back and get that information or those habits that we learn, and we apply that information to our current life. So if you are in an environment or you're being taught healthy values, healthy money habits, that will stay with you as you mature and grow older, and you will use that information to apply to your current life. So that's why it's important to do that. And that's why it is important that those kind of teachings go on from generation to generation.
Let's dive into. All right, so we know the basics and the foundations of how you could plant these generational seeds, but let's also talk about the importance of financial literacy and why we need to have more conversations, let alone, starting at home for one, but also in school. Can you talk about the importance of financial literacy, Bobby?
Well, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have with financial literacy is in personal finances. When do we start teaching it, and how do we teach it so that it will be the most effective way to do that? Right now, there seems to be a trend that's moving not as fast as I would like for it to see it move, but it is moving in terms of reincorporating some form of financial literacy into the school system and into the regular curriculum. And some states are going as far as mandating that. Back when I was in school, many decades ago, there was a course that they call home economics or something like that. And within that home economics, that's where you was taught how to cook, sew, all of these things, handle money. All of these things were taught just basic life skills. But they got away from the home economics courses, and they stopped teaching that. So there was a big void there. I guess they thought that people would learn how to count money and take care of themselves on their own. But because of that big void, and because the people have struggled so badly to try to make things work for them in their life, they're realizing now that they've got to come back and teach the basics, how to budgeting. The budgeting process, the priority process, credit cards, and all of these things that we encounter on a day-to-day basis to try to survive. So there is a trend of moving back from an educational standpoint in the school system. But outside of the school system, there also has to be a mechanism where people can get access to this kind of information and the training. And that's what a lot of the coaches, financial coaches do, financial literacy groups do, nonprofits do. They're out there trying to connect with people to show them and to offer them information that they need so they can survive on a day-to-day basis with their finances.
You definitely touched on something, home economics, them taking those skill sets out of the education system, assuming that we would learn these things on our own. But in their defense, I think it's really easy to learn all this information now. We got Google, right? We got YouTube, and there is just so many different resources that we have at our fingertips. It's just, honestly, I just think, I'm just going to say it. There's just some people that's just lazy when it comes to information, right? They want this microwavable, success when it comes to financial literacy. You're not going to get an 800 credit score tomorrow if your credit score is at 300, right? So let's talk about credit, the importance of credit. I recently interviewed just another financial expert, and there were some things that we kind of touched on, and there's some things I definitely left on the table. And I want to talk about the importance of credit, because credit could literally put you in a very good position in terms of just success and opportunities and what you could do with personal credit. Bobby, at what point, in terms of age, at what age would you recommend, the youth to really focus on credit? Is this right out the gate when you're 10 years old? Should you be having these conversations, or more in your teenage years? One of these conversations need to be had in terms of credit with the youth.
Well, credit, in terms of when to start credit starts with when you start teaching basic personal finance to children, because credit really comes out of the lack of living out of what you make. And if you live by what you make, then you reduce the chances of having to borrow as much. So credit is a borrowing mechanism to allow you to purchase things before you actually have the funds to pay for them. So when you start teaching financial literacy, if you teach it in a way where a person is taught to live out of their income, then you already laying the foundation for a good credit behavior. You also laying the foundation for the mindset of less instant gratification. You learn how to wait on things. You don't be you mentioned the microwave society or want things instantly. When you living out of what you make, out of your income, then you understand that if I don't have the money to buy it right then, I'm gonna have to wait and save that money up. And when you do that, you don't need the credit. So that's the foundation of credit. Now, as you go on to 18 and 19, you would experience some opportunities to get that credit or to use that credit. And if you don't have the training, you may not understand how credit works. And you may think, I can just swipe, or use a credit card, or get a credit card, and everything's going to be fine. But as you know, the bill will eventually come due, and you're going to need some money to pay for that, or you're going to default on your debt, or you're going to get into more debt trying to pay for the debt you're already in.
Man, you mentioned the D word. Let's talk about it. We got to talk about debt. I've recently looked at debt a lot differently. Grant Cardone talks about this a lot. There's good debt, there's bad debt. Is it worth it going in quote unquote good debt for real estate? Absolutely. But as you mentioned with the credit card, I think credit cards are terrible. That's just my opinion. I've been there, I've done that, and it didn't really necessarily help me out as much as I thought it would in terms boost my credit score and get me where I need to be. It just turned into one of those things that kind of hindered me, because life is unexpected, right? You could lose your job and now you're really behind on that credit card bill, right? So that's terrible debt, right? Good debt would be, you're borrowing money, you're looking to maybe buy or flip a property. You got some hard money from a lender or private money. That is what I would consider good debt. But for a credit card, I just don't see it worth it, Bobby. I've been burnt before, so I'm speaking from that experience. But that actually happened to me. I had a credit card. I was using it consistently. I got fired from a job. It really put me out of commission with it. And it took me a while to recover from it. But that's life, and that's what happens. So what would you say to someone if they're in a situation like that? How can someone get out that rut of that debt?
Well, you touched on a good point about that, because I can relate to that credit card debt myself, having, trying to raise a family and trying to maybe have too much too quickly. You see the house, you see the cars and all of the nice things, and you just maybe entering the workforce or haven't been in there very long, but you want all of these things. And I was guilty of that. And I didn't lose my job, but I ended up with a lot of debt because I was trying to buy furniture and the cars and the home and all these things that, people say you should have. and it just didn't fit into my income. So I went and used credit to try to make it work, and ended up with a lot of debt as well. So I can definitely relate to what you're talking about, and it's a bummer. It's a bad feeling, and sometimes you feel like you can't get into what you can't get out of that. So, but the best thing to do is just to it's so some people say good debt, bad debt. Credit cards, no credit cards. But I'm a person that says, if you are disciplined with your finances, one credit card or even two credit cards are okay. If you are disciplined, if you can pay the card off each month at the end, when it's due, then it's okay to have credit cards as far as I'm concerned. But you get in trouble when the bill comes in and you see that minimum balance of $20 and you think that that's all you have to pay and you're good. And before you know it, you didn't pay off last month's bill, but you paid $20 on it. And then you go out and use that card again, and the bill comes in. Now the bill is $25, but you might have added a couple of hundred onto it. And you just pay the $25 and think you're good. And before you know it, it's more debt than you could ever handle. So you have to be disciplined when using a credit card. And in terms of good, there's a lot of talk out there, a lot of opinions about good debt, bad debt. Some say you should never, buy a used car because it's cheaper. And that could be a good debt. And some say, well, if you buy a car through a loan, that's bad debt. Well, it depends on your situation. If you need that car to go to work to earn income, that may not be a bad deal for you. But if you just want to go out and buy a car because you're tired of driving the one you have, and a new car, and the smell going to make you feel better, then that would probably be a bad situation to do that. So it all depends on the individual, I think, more than anything else, and the situation that they're in at that time. Even a house, you say, well, a house is an investment and it will appreciate over time. Well, you go out, if you buy a house you can't afford, that may not be a good debt because you can't afford it. So it just all depends on the situation and the individual, what they're doing with the debt.
Bobby, what would you say is the fundamentals of money management?
The basic fundamental of money management is knowing what's coming in, knowing how much money you're going to have at each pay period or income period. Know when it's going out and where it's going out. That means your bills. Know when your bills come in. And putting something aside. Pay yourself first, if you want to use that term. Treat yourself as an expense. That's what I tell my clients. Treat yourself as an expense, just like you pay your water bill, your light bill, or your housing bill. Put yourself in your budget. And you use that money to set aside for emergencies or long-term savings or whatever, or for your regular, what I call, some folks call it this blow money. You put it in your pocket, some of that, but put yourself in your budget. A lot of people, they work hard, legitimate job. They're really trying to make things work, but they pay everybody else but themselves. And at the end of the pay period, there's no money there to pay themselves because they've paid it all out to other people. So if you can reverse that, change that mindset, put yourself near the top of your expense budgeting or sheet and pay yourself first or second. And then you pay your bills out of what's left. If there's nothing left, then you don't create a bill. So that's what I would say.
What would you say for you, of course, your experience in the industry, what was your biggest financial lesson learned with all the years and the experience? What was the biggest financial lesson that you've learned?
That's a great question. And there's so many lessons that I've learned, but I go back to just the basic, live out of what you make. That's the simplest thing I can tell anyone. Live out of what you make. I mean, if you make $15 an hour, that's it. You got to find a way to live out of that. Or if you make $75, $80 an hour, or if you're making six figures, just live out of what you make. I mean, that's who you are. You don't have to pretend that you're living, beyond your means. That's frustrating. You're always trying to figure something out, or trying to shift money and move money around and making life really, really stressful, or hiding money and things like that, or owing people and all this kind of stuff. But if you just live out of what you make, you will always have the money to pay the bills.
What would you say is, some common financial challenges that you're seeing maybe clients have or prospects have, or maybe people have? Are you seeing people make the same mistakes? If so, what are the same mistakes that people are making?
Well, when you talk about mistakes, that's kind of from the way we look at things, that's kind of hard to identify a mistake. And the reason I say that is because of this. From a mental standpoint, and from the way we process information, we make decisions based on the information that we have at the time. Now, we may not always evaluate the information properly, but we make decisions based on that information. And what we do as time go on and we get new information, we apply that new information to an old decision to see if the decision will hold up. And if the decision holds up, you say, well, that's a great decision because it holds up on the new information. But if new information comes in and we apply it to a decision in the past and it doesn't hold up, we say, well, that was a bad decision. I shouldn't have done that. That just didn't work out. But in all actuality, it may not have been a bad decision because you made it with the information that you had at the time. So that's how I look at decisions from a coaching standpoint. And I don't really beat people up or make people feel bad because of past decisions, because normally they make it with the best information that they have at the time. It may not be good information, but that's all that they have to make. That's all they have to go on.
Thank you for streaming this episode of the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. Don't forget to visit StclairSpeaks.com and order your copy of my first book, Sweats to Suits, available now in Kindle and paperback edition. If you want to be my next guest, or my next guest, give me a referral, and I will sponsor your business in an ad segment just like this. Visit StclairSpeaks.com and learn more about the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast proposal. It's that time. So let's talk about you make a very good point. Sometimes keeping it simple is the best thing to do, because we definitely overcomplicate things by trying to add in too much and getting fancy. It just takes away from the whole basic of what we're trying to accomplish here. So I definitely want to talk about debt to income ratio, right? Identifying, and kind of like swinging back to debt, but identifying where's that debt coming from? Are we just behind on bills? Is it credit cards? What are some things that we could get away with? There's this app that I downloaded recently, I think like 4 or 5 months ago. It's called Truebill. And I really like it because it helps me manage my money. It helps me manage everything. So it tells me what am I getting billed for? And it's always iTunes. iTunes is always charging me for an app or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it starts to add up, Bobby. It really starts to add up. If you're paying a premium for this app, it's $12, then $12 here, $5 here, $10 here. And I'm looking at this. I'm like, wait, hold on. I got $80 in apps. Oh, no. Oh, no. So I had to cut that down and really ask myself, like, okay, what's really worth spending money? Like, there's platforms like Hootsuite where you could just automate and schedule out your content. For me, that's worth paying for. But there are some apps that are just a waste of money. And I had to look at, where's my money going? Is this an expense? Is this a liability? How is this really helping me? And I had to cut that off. Let's talk about the whole debt to income ratio and getting rid of pointless expenses that's literally just eating up our money.
Well, the debt to income ratio, that's something that I guess the economists came up with based on them studying the economy and studying how we live and our income and telling us or recommending us how much we should spend, what percentage of our income should go to various expenses. That's where that comes from, the debt to income ratio. Now, the best I can remember, it started back early on when the federal government, it's just a little backstory, the best I can remember it here. It started with the housing, public housing. And the government came out with this formula saying that in order to live in public housing, you can live in public housing. So we're going to charge you a percentage of your income should go to housing. The subsidize, and we will subsidize the rest. But you're going to have to pay a certain percentage of your income to stay in government housing. That formula was created by economists, and it was something like 28% or 26% of your income would go to housing. That's the foundation of that. Now, they put that in place, and it stayed in place for many years. And then all of a sudden, when the economy began to change and our society began to change, and women began to enter the workforce, they bumped that up because you had more money. You had husband and a wife working. So they changed that to something like 30 something percent, 35%, 34% of your income. But now they've changed again. I'm not sure what it is now, but that's the background on that debt to income ratio, where that came from. But
go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
Those numbers are still out there, and people still use them. I know I used them when I was buying my house, but a lot of times you go to a bank and they say, well, you can afford this much house. Well, the bank is a business, and they always give you the maximum amount. Whereas if you buy something a little bit less expensive, you may be better off.
Personally, I just think just where we're at in terms of just the economy, I just think everyone needs to be on notice that this is not a drill, right? This is real life. People recently lost their jobs, careers, etc. COVID came. Then we recently had Facebook and Instagram shut down, right? But a lot of people generate income off of social media. Me being one of them, right? But I don't really rely on Facebook and Instagram, so it doesn't really affect me as much. But just that platform being off, it was the thing that woke me up even more, because I'm like, wait a minute, what would happen if these social media platforms was to shut down? How are we still conducting business and meeting people and still getting our business out there and doing all these things? There's a lot that came from this pandemic, especially with online businesses on social media and people pivoting and putting themselves in a different position to be successful, going away from what they've known for as long as they've worked at these corporations. Now you're on your own, you're on these platforms, and you have aspirations to launch your own business, and you got your brand out there and you're networking, you're creating groups on Facebook, and you're present on social media. What are some ways for you to scale your business offline and online. Maybe I'm kind of like going down my own little rabbit hole here, but for me, what I'm trying to say is this. I've recently learned, based on the last 48 hours, to not put all my eggs in one basket in particular, but have different things going on in the back end, because life is unpredictable. I mean, was COVID unpredictable? Some could say yes and no, but the way it put the entire world at a different position, I think a lot of people need to pay attention. That's another reason why I wanted to invite you on the podcast, Bobby, is because these conversations need to be had. There's a lot of people that ended up in debt because of COVID. I know a lot of people struggling. I know people that lost their apartments, lost their jobs, and people I've never thought would be struggling is actually struggling now because they don't know how to pivot is what I'm trying to say. And that's, I guess, where I was trying to go, is because conversations like this need to be had. A lot of people need to know that there are other options out there. Like there's credit and there's leveraging your credit, but there's also addressing the debt, right? I just think, conversations like this need to be held more often. People need to hear what you have to say, of course. And I love podcasting, especially for this, because if social media shut down, I'll be okay, right? I do have a list of all of the people I've interviewed, and we could host events and do all these things. So for me, it does help me out, but I definitely want to help my audience out and listeners and people across the world and shed light on conversations like this, because financial literacy, it doesn't matter where you're from, your background. You could get started by just managing your money starting with what you have right now. Like you said, Bobby, starting with what you have now. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from this interview that you want listeners and the audience to take away from everything that you touched on in this interview? I'm sorry.
The biggest thing is to be prepared for anything, because life is so uncertain. And if life is uncertain, then whatever you do is uncertain. There's no automatic. You talked about the pandemic. And one thing the pandemic exposed us and taught us is what we already knew. We already knew that we didn't have enough savings set aside. We already knew that. We knew we wasn't saving money. I mean, the numbers prove that. You can look at we can look at our own bank accounts, and we're living from paycheck to paycheck. So we knew we didn't have anything, but what was banking on is that it wouldn't happen, or nothing wouldn't happen. And when you get into that position of thinking that nothing will happen or it won't happen to me, guess what? It's going to happen to you, because it can happen to anyone else. And so we were not prepared for the pandemic at all. Now, the pandemic was so devastating that to the fact that there was people who were prepared somewhat, but they were overwhelmed by it because it was such a horrific thing. But there's a lot of us that were not prepared for any kind of setback or any kind of hiccup financially. And those are the folks I'm talking about getting prepared. Set aside some money. Like I said earlier, begin to pay yourself first, because things are going to happen. It may not be another pandemic, maybe something else, but there's another wave or something coming down, and you have time now to start getting ready for that, start planning for that. So that's what I would say. Just get prepared. In terms of the recent glitch in Facebook and Instagram, here's the deal with social media. Even though social media will allow you to reach out and connect with a lot of people, it does not replace actually talking to people. And what I mean by that, a lot of times you may have a big business on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, or whatever, but you may not have that person's contact information. You may not have their email address, or you may just have their Facebook name or their Instagram name. And that's where your most value is in that information right there. So when you interact with people on these social platforms, one of the things you should be trying to do is to get some kind of contact information, phone number or email address where you can reach out to them one-on-one or personally. I mean, we give our information to Facebook. They give them everything, birth dates, addresses, Instagram the same way. They have everything on us, but when we get on these platforms and do all this work, but we don't collect any information about the people who we're talking to, or who is viewing our data or the things that we create. And so when things go down, we don't have any way to contact them. So when we do this, we need to be able to collect an email address or a phone number or something that we can contact these people off of these platforms. And that gives your business a lot more stability than relying on, well, I got to get on Facebook to talk to my group, or I got to get on Twitter or Instagram to talk to my folks. Whereas if you have their contact information, you can send them an email blast. So that's what I would say you should do to work towards.
Definitely. That's something I've been looking into for the last 24 hours. If you're not building a list, you're not building a business.
Right. You got to build a list. Build a list.
It is crucial. No, you make a good point. It's very crucial for that, because I was honestly, when Facebook shut down, I'm like, man, what do I use Facebook for? And I remember what I use Facebook for. I'm like, man, I got to really utilize Facebook just in case this happens again, or they permanently remove it. I'm not trying to go down the rabbit hole on what's going on with Facebook right now. I've been watching, I've been looking and reading about the Facebook whistler, and I'm like, that's just crazy. But you make a good point. Building that list, getting that contact information. We are living in the unpredictable. We are literally living in the unpredictable, and this is exactly why. Number one, this is why we met in a networking room, I'm constantly networking. I mean, because we live in the unpredictable. We are literally living it. And it's crazy because in maybe 10 years, 15 years, this is something that we're going to look back on, and everyone's going to be talking about, like COVID and the shutdown, then the riots, then Facebook. We're literally living in that right now, and how we conduct and how we move and how we operate. I mean, look, in 5 years, I don't want to be kicking myself. And I was already kicking myself for the risk that I didn't take in the pandemic. And I've taken a lot of risk, by the way. But one thing I was definitely telling myself this morning, Bobby, was as much risk as I've taken, I wish I'd taken more. And I am literally living in a time where it's like, yeah, I'm definitely taking more risk. Every industry professional that I've interviewed, I've asked them the same question. If there's something that you would do when you were younger, what would it be? Oh, I would take more risk. Everyone's saying the same answer. I would take more risk. I would have taken more risk. I would have, had more of a fearless mentality. And, success leaves clues, and you can learn from someone else's success just as their failures as well. So I'm constantly looking for ways where I could learn from someone else. And this is why I love podcasting, because I can invite you on, I can pick your brain, but I can learn from your success and your failures as well, knowing that, hey, like Bobby's saying, look, manage and look at what's coming in, what's going out, write these things down. This is extremely important. This is vital information, especially right now. Bobby, I definitely want to thank you for spending your time with me today. Please shout out your social media, if social media is still going to be around. So hopefully, shout out your social media. Where can we follow you, keep up with you, your website as well? Any special books or anything you got going on that you want to kind of promote? Shout it out as well.
You can contact me at my website is clarkonmoney.com. There's articles there for you. There's money calculators. There's also a newsletter sign up, and there's also offer a free 30-minute assessment. There's no sales push toward that. We just have a conversation and see where you are and see if we can put our heads together to help you to get where you want to go. So I offer that to anyone that for the 30-minute free assessment or synergy call that I have. You can also find me on LinkedIn with Bobby Clark on Money. I'm also on Instagram TV. Once a week, I go on and put on about a minute or 2 minute talk about personal finance, either the external, the part of finance, or the internal part of finance. So I talk about that on those sites. So, and I do have a Facebook page, it's Bobby Clark on Money as well. So there's information there that you can reach out to me.
Oh, there you have it. Oh, man, this was great. Like always, guys, I want to thank you again for streaming and listening to this episode of the St. Clair Speak Show podcast. Don't forget, you could stream this entire interview from start to finish. Now streaming on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast, Audible, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Radio Public, and Breaker. This is the St. Clair Speak Show podcast. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Like I always say, what good is information if you don't apply it? It's that time.